Nothing like Rams tears, Bronco Nation. Welcome to my review of the Boise State versus Colorado State win. This was a massive win for Bronco Nation. Now, yes, it wasn't the dominating win that myself and a few other people were predicting, though I think a lot of people thought it was going to be close. I thought Boise State, coming out of the bye week, motivated to get back on track, would come out and dominate Colorado State. But Colorado State played pretty well, and that really showed in this one. I said in my preview video of this game that Colorado State was better than their record, better than their 3-4 record showed. They had been in some very close matchups. Should have had the win against Utah State, should have had the win against Vanderbilt, were close in the game against Iowa. So this was a Colorado State team that, while they're not an elite team in the Mountain West, they are a team that is better than their 3-4 record, and they came in hungry to win this one. Colorado State has never beaten Boise State, and now 11 wins in a row, they haven't beaten them yet. But Colorado State never beaten Boise State. Boise State playing and at home for Colorado State. This was a big game for the Rams. The big game they definitely had circled on their calendar, and they came out motivated and ready to play. We're going to go through the offense, defense, special teams here, look at how Boise State performed, provide grades to all of those, and we'll also look at my 3 keys to the game. But just as an overall summary of this game, this was a big comeback win for Boise State to prove that even when adversity struck, they could come back, they could dig themselves out of a hole, something they really haven't done this season, dig themselves out of a hole, come and get the win, and finish the game strong after going down 9 points in the first half. Boise State has a lot of tough games on the rest of their schedule. They got to play Fresno State, they got to play San Diego State, they got to play Wyoming, and they also have to play New Mexico here down the rest of the stretch. So see, they've still got some tough games here down the stretch, and with this win, it gets them to 4-4, and they still need 2 more wins to get bowl eligible. So they're New Mexico probably, you could probably say it's a guaranteed win, though nothing in this season is guaranteed, and then they're going to have to beat one of those other big ones. But what I saw at Boise State today gives me hope that they can do that, and it also, as this whole season has, continues to give me hope for the future for this Boise State program, and we'll talk a little bit about that as we go through this video today. All right, so we're already 2 minutes in, so I'll jump right into it. Offense, right off the bat. Offense, slow start in this one, obviously. Low throw, drop pass by Evans on that 3rd and short, killed that first drive. Low throw by Bachmeier, and also drop pass by Evans. And then the second drive, they got off to a pretty good start. Great 30-yard pass to Van Buren, who hasn't really been used heavily in the receiving game, but he had a nice catch and scampered down the sideline. Called back for holding. It looked like it was, or not holding, but pass interference, illegal rub play on that. Looked pretty legit. I wouldn't call that one on the refs on that. So, kind of shooting themselves in the foot here early on. Got off to a very slow start. Colorado State, just the opposite. Drives down the field, gets on the board, manages to put up 16 points in this first half, a touchdown, and 3 field goals there to give themselves a 16-7 lead at the half. So Colorado State coming out very motivated in this one. We'll talk about the defense in a second. But other things that were holding Boise State back, they weren't doing anything to push the defense off the line. They were doing a ton of run plays up the middle that weren't really working. They weren't throwing the ball deep down the field. They had a couple short passes here and there, but they weren't testing the middle of the defense. So the defense was kind of flowing to the outside and close to the line of scrimmage, which was killing whatever Boise State was wanting to do. Boise State has some good plays. It's actually interesting looking statistically at the first and second half. Yardage-wise, Boise State put up almost the same amount of yards in the first half in the run game and overall game that they did in the second half. It's just the point differences were completely different. So Boise State was able to get off some good plays in the first half, but because they weren't pushing Colorado State off the line of scrimmage, those plays ended in failed drives for the most part, except for, of course, the touchdown drive. Of course, a terrible referee call, which we will talk about in my 3 keys to the game. Definitely took a touchdown off the board there for Riley Smith. So really, it should have been 2 touchdowns going into the half here. But one of my keys to the game was take it out of the referee's hands. So we're going to address that at the end of my video. I'm not going to get sidetracked by that now. I will get sidetracked briefly here because if I don't say it now, I will forget. So I'm going to kind of jump ahead a little bit. I'm going to talk about Riley Smith. had a touchdown taken off the board there in the first half. Boise State was starting to get momentum, been able to go down and score, and they were starting to push themselves back into this game. Riley Smith gets a touchdown. His first touchdown of the year gets taken off the board. But despite that, Riley Smith had an excellent game today. He should have had a touchdown. Finally, he and Bachmeier got on the same page, and Bachmeier has missed Riley Smith like 5 times this year for touchdowns. Overthrows, underthrows, you name it, mostly overthrows. This game, on target with Riley Smith. That's a good sign going forward. If these two guys have been able to match up their chemistry, Riley Smith can be a big target for us going forward the rest of the season. But even with that touchdown off the board, he had a big first down conversion in the second half for Boise State on the third down, stretching the ball out, crazy play. That ended up being in a touchdown. And he also blocked the punt. So I just wanted, while we're on the subject of Riley Smith, I wanted to give a shout out to Riley Smith, who had a great game. All right, just moving here with the overview. The big thing, first half, only 1 touchdown, lots of failed drives, running game, not consistent, not being able to push themselves consistently down the field because Boise State they were being pretty, I wouldn't say that they were being stagnant offensively, and I wouldn't say that they weren't being innovative offensively. Not as innovative as they were in the second half, but the play calling wasn't stale for the most part. But it just wasn't aggressive enough. Very, very too conservative play calling coming out the gate here. Really hurt Boise State early in this one. And luckily, they were able to turn things around and get those adjustments in the second half. Second half, completely different story. Like I said, pretty much the same statistical as far as yardage goes, but Boise State turned those yards into drive scoring points. 21 points in the second half. So 7 points in the first half, 21 points in the second half to come from 9 points down to win this game by 9 points. So from 7-16 to 28-19, and the best comeback Boise State's had this season. An awesome, awesome game for Boise State. A big part of that was Helani getting back involved. Helani, he was back in this game after exiting a couple games ago with an injury. It was great to see him back out there. They said he was playing on a limited snap count. I just want to talk about that limited snap count a little bit. The idea of the limited snap count makes sense when you're trying to save someone for games down the season, or it's early in the season and you don't want to you want to get them recovered so they can move forward in the season. But the idea of someone being on a snap count this late in the season, if you're going to be in the game, you should go 100% and use that player as much as you need to use them. You shouldn't be limited in saying, okay, we can only play him 10 times. He can only touch the ball 10 times. Once he's done, he's done. If that player's starting to heat up, if he's starting to have momentum, if he's being a big part of the offensive momentum in the game, it shouldn't be looking at having to pull him because he reaches a snap count. The idea of a snap count and I think that's part of. I think it's an interesting play call, an interesting decision making by this coaching staff early in their coaching careers here with Boise State. But like I said, idea of a snap count makes sense early in the season. But when you get to late it is in this season, what are you saving them for exactly? You want to put your players in that are healthy. If they're healthy for you, go out there and they play. If they're playing gimpy, if they're injured a little bit, play. You got to be smart about that. But you shouldn't have guys in there that are only going 80% or that are only playing on a limited basis. So it was great to see Helani back. He looked really good. I'm hoping that he comes back strong with no snap count going for the rest of the season because he looked great in this one today. Not a huge statistical performance, 10 carries, 43 yards, but 4.3 yards per carry. He was breaking tons of tackles. He was showing that top-end speed, that maneuverability. The first touch for him was a 10-yard carry. So showing what he brings to the game when he's in there. When he's healthy, he's one of the best running backs Boise State's had in their long history of running backs. So hopefully he can come back in strong and healthy the rest of the season for Boise State here. But the big thing in the second half, the reason Boise State scored on so many of their plays, and at least 2 of them for sure, was just amazing play calling by Tim Plow. I'm going to talk about 2 of those briefly here. First one was an amazing, this was the first touchdown in the second half that Boise State had to pull within one score there in the second half. Was a beautiful play call where they faked the handoff and then tossed it on the end around to Evans, who ran it in for the touchdown. So they faked the handoff up the middle, and then Evans coming around, they pitched out to him, he ran it in, it was wide open for a touchdown. The second amazing and just ingenious play call was was a similar design where they faked the run up the middle, but instead of Evans coming out on a screen pass, this time they had on a end around. This time Evans backed off like he was going to run the screen, and then he ran out into the flat. They faked the handoff up the middle, and then they looked down the middle, and Boise State had actually been testing the middle of the defense here in the second half. So the defense was all keyed in. Evans was running a skinny post straight up the middle there. The defense crowded it in on the middle of the defense. Evans was wide open, passed it to him, ran it in for a touchdown. Just brutal. Sorry, not Evans. Cobbs ran it in for a touchdown. So Evans was faking it. Cobbs came back to fake the screen pass and then ran out into the flat. They threw it to Cobbs, and he ran in for the touchdown. So it was those two play calls right there. There's been a lot of criticism against Tim Plow this season. I mean, a ton of criticism against Tim Plow. He runs a very unique and very different offense than really any Boise State fans have ever seen, and maybe a lot of people in college football have seen. And I've said it before so far this season that this isn't Tim Plow's offense. He's kind of Frankensteining his offensive style into the players that are on this roster and trying to adapt it to what Boise State can bring to the table. So these aren't the players that he is recruiting to bring in and run his offense, first of all. But secondly, he's a young coach. This is a young head coach who is coaching for the first time in his position at the FBS level. He is adapting the shift from FCS to FBS. It is not the same league. There's a big reason that there's a difference. It's not high school to college, but there's a big difference. There's a big reason that those two levels of college football don't mix on the same playing field besides a couple of non-conference games throughout the season. Because it is a much faster game at FBS level. You are playing with a whole different beast there as far as with the defenses that come to the table, as far as the capabilities of offensive players. You're going from a low-end vehicle straight up to a Porsche on this one. So he is trying to adapt to this new level of play at the FBS level. And what we're seeing is raw talent. When he draws up plays like these two touchdown plays that are just ingenious. I mean, this is classic Boise State high-level intellect innovation that Boise State is famous for. That's why he deserves to be a Boise State coach. He shows that raw talent. In between there is a lot of inconsistency. The whole season, there's been a lot of questionable play calls, a lot of back and forth between play styles because he's trying to figure things out. But he's a young coach, and he's starting to figure it out, and he's improving. And this kind of play calling, especially what we saw overall in the second half and these specific plays, gives me an incredible amount of faith in Tim Plow going forward. I think it's still going to take him another season beyond this year to fully develop into the offensive coordinator that he is destined to be. But once he gets past this kind of developmental stage, once he adjusts, once he starts bringing in the players that he wants to play on his offense, the guys that fit into his scheme, whenever he's able to run exactly what he wants to run for Boise State, and he's adapted to this level of play to a state where he can where the game starts to slow down for him, and he can start. I mean, it's like being a quarterback at the offense coordinator position. When he can start to diagnose the defenses correctly, and he starts to bring some consistency into this offense, it's going to be a classic Boise State offense. It's going to look a little bit different than most Boise State offenses, but it's going to be classic, and then it's going to be high octane, high point scoring, and incredibly fun to watch. And I am incredibly excited for that future with Tim Plow. What really worked well today out of his play calling was the screen plays. It was always there. It's been there all season. I wish that he'd run it more this year. Almost any time that Boise State goes to the screen, it's there. The Boise State offensive line is pretty weak. How do you adjust for a weak offensive line? You go to the screenplay. You take it out of their hands. You get them downfield, blocking downfield, which is a lot easier than trying to stop the defensive rush. It also forces the defense to back off and helps the offensive line overall in the whole. So I wish Boise State needs to keep running these screenplays. Even if they don't work every single play, they will force the defense to slow down this blitz, and it will exploit those blitzes that they're bringing against Boise State. The second thing that worked really well is the wide receiver sweeps. Boise State was incredibly effective on this. They had, out of the 177 yards rushing that Boise State had today, 70 of that was by wide receivers. So 3 wide receivers for Boise State accounted for 70 yards out of the 177 yards total rushing, and the only touchdown of the game was on a wide receiver sweep, the one that we just previously talked about to Evans there. So Boise State, they saw that, against Utah State, it worked incredibly effectively, and then Boise State pretty much just went away from it. A couple of plays a game, but nothing. Boise State, this style of play is working. Because offensive line is still struggling, they're better than they were previously. This new lineup, this new offensive set is working better than it was earlier in the year. So they said it was the fifth formation that they've run. So this new Boise State line is working better than they were previously. The running backs are starting to heat up a little bit, but Boise State still needs to keep the defenses on their heels. It's still not a good offensive line, even though it is not being quite as atrocious as it used to be. It's still not a great offensive line. Boise State still needs to be mixing it up in the run game, and I loved what they did today. That kind of play calling, that kind of aggressive, gutsy play calling, that kind of innovation is what's going to help Boise State get some of those wins that they're not supposed to win coming down the rest of the season stretch here. So let's just talk about offensively. So it's a B+ overall for the offense, mostly because of the incredible performance in the second half that really brought Boise State up to the level of competition that we expect out of a Boise State offensive here. You know, they should have scored a lot more points than they did. There were some big mistakes here, especially some bad calls, but some bad penalties against Boise State that kind of hurt them here. So definitely wasn't a 100% across the board smooth and effective offensive flow today. So that's why the B+ rating. But it was effective enough to get the win, and it looked much better in the second half. And we started to see a taste of the future of this Boise State program, what Tim Plow can bring to the table. Talking about Bachmeier today. Bachmeier, you know, as always with Bachmeier, a little bit of an up and down performance. Mostly up, 253 yards passing, 3 touchdowns. Had some great moments, had a NFL caliber throw. Absolutely NFL caliber throw to a double cover tight end hopper, just down the left side, of the boundary. It was the longest pass of the game. It was 51 yards score. Not all that was through the air, but I think 30 plus because he ran for like 15 or so afterwards. So it was a really long throw. It was perfectly thrown, double cover, dropped it in perfectly to the tight end hopper. So NFL level throw there. He had some other great, escaped a blitz in the end zone that should have been a safety, managed to wiggle out of it and run for the first down. He was hit constantly throughout the game, as he always is, but managed to get it off most times, was able to throw it while getting hit, had an amazing throw to Khalil Shakir off his back foot while getting pressured. I think he got hit after he threw. Off his back foot, was able to hit him for a 25-plus yard strike on the right boundary. Awesome job. He did have some down moments. Early on in the game, he sped up as the game went on, but early on in the game, he was double clutching passes leading to hits or sacks. He was sacked after 6 seconds, so the one time offensive line actually gives him time in the pocket. I counted it, 6 Mississippis of just standing there, and he still got sacked. So yeah, it was a coverage sack. There was nowhere to go with the ball, but you got to throw it out of bounds at that point, or you got to run out of bounds. You got to do something. A quarterback of Bachmeier's level, the amount of experience that he has now at this point in his career, even though it's not as much experience as it shows on paper because he's been injured and reduced season with COVID. So like I said, he's more of like an experienced sophomore versus the how long has he been? 2019, the junior that he's considered. So he's more of like an experienced sophomore than a junior at this point. But even so, with the amount of experience that he had, especially this late in the season, he should be knowing when to get the ball off. So most of it is the offensive line being atrocious for the most part, as it has been all season, especially in pass blocking. But it continues to be part of it is the fact that Bachmeier doesn't get the ball out fast enough. We saw him getting much better at that in the second half, a lot more quick throws. Tim Plow calling a much better game in the second half, a lot of quick throws exploding in the middle, quick throws exploding in the middle of the field, deep balls, all of that. But first half play for Bachmeier, and this is something he's got to improve on. He's got to get off to better, quicker starts because there's going to be teams down the row here, down the rest of the season here, that Boise State's not going to have a chance to get back into the game if they get themselves out of it early like they did in this one. He's got to get off to a faster start, and he's got to get the ball out quicker. I'm not force it. That was another thing. He actually almost threw a pick because he forced it to double cover Shakir there in the end zone. So don't force the ball, but know when to get rid of it, throw it out of bounds. Get it to your outlet receiver if you have one, but don't take the sack in a situation like that. So overall, nice performance by Bachmeier, and I think he's continuing to improve, especially in that second half. It'll be great to see what he comes in next week with a lot of momentum. The running play, the running game for Boise State, I said, was very, very exciting. 9 different players ran the ball for Boise State. for 177 yards and a touchdown. Like I said, 3 of those were wide receivers, a couple of quarterbacks in the mix, 3 running backs. Boise State got everybody involved in the running game here today. It was very reassuring to see Boise State starting to establish some success in the running game. Their running game has improved in the second half of the season. It's by no means up to Boise State's standards, but compared to the first half performance and the second half, it was far more effective in the second half, even though the stats were pretty much the same. What Boise State was getting consistently out of the running game in the second half was much more effective, and just like the second half of the season, it's been much more effective overall. Halani, like I said, 10 carries, 43 yards. It was great to see him out there. Cyrus was the main bell cow back today because Halani looked like like the announcers were saying, was on a limited snap count. But 19 carries for 61 yards, 3.2 yards per carry. But he had some really nice plays too. Had one play where he jumped over a defender, and he had some nice moves. I mean, at one point he ran for 4 yards, but he had like 3 jukes and broke 2 tackles to get those 4 yards. So he has great maneuverability as well. Both these running backs out last week not last week, it was a bye week, but out against Air Force due to injuries. So great to have that bye week to get these players back into the game. Boise State, a much, much more effective game when these 2 guys are involved in the offense. It'll be great to see Halani going for the rest of the season, hopefully without that limited snap count going into next week. But yeah, the offense, despite the great plays here by Halani and Cyrus and some great plays by Cobbs, Evans, and Hopper, who combined with a couple other players managed 72 yards out of the 100 off passing yards or receiving yards Boise State had in the second half. Despite all these great plays, the player of the game, and this is not a surprise, offensively and defensively for Boise State, is hands down Khalil Shakir. Khalil Shakir with not his most statistically dramatic game. He has had one game where he had more yardage overall, but when you combine rushing and receiving yards, this is his most overall impressive game. Boise State completely channeled their offense through Shakir today after not being very involved in the offense the last 3 games. I said he'd had 4 touches last week, 5 touches the week before that, and 4 touches the week before that. So really limited role in the offense, and Boise State completely flipped the script today, changed that entirely. He had 9 receptions for 118 yards for 13.1 yards per catch, and 7 carries for 43 yards. So out of Boise State's 430 offensive yards, he had 161, which counts for over a third of Boise State's offensive performance today. Just an amazing job by Khalil Shakir. Even though he didn't score a touchdown, which is crazy. He has all these yards, he's touching the ball nonstop, and he doesn't score a touchdown. Even though he didn't score a touchdown, he is the number one reason that Boise State managed to win this game. His complete go-get-it attitude all game long was an incredible job to see here by Khalil Shakir, especially, like I said, after a limited role the last few games, whether that was just because of poor play calling or the defense is keying up on him. Defense was definitely keyed up on him today, but Boise State found a way to get him the ball. And when you have your key player involved in the game to this level, you're going to find a way to win, and that's what we saw today. So offensive performance, B+. I'm not going to take as long running through the rest of these, but offense was definitely the main reason or a big reason that Boise State was able to climb out of that hole and get that win in this one, and definitely encouraging for Boise State fans going forward. All right. Defense overall, I'm going to lead with the grade on this one, and I'll explain why. A overall by the defense. Yes, they gave up a lot of yards in this one. 287 in the first half, but only 94 yards allowed in the second half. So 287 yards in the first half. If we'd stopped at the first half, down 7-16, gave up 287 yards, probably be looking at a C+ grade or a B- or something like that. But Boise State in the second half only allowed 94 yards, and only 9 of those were rushing yards. So Boise State gave up a ton of rushing yards in the first half of this game, but only 9 rushing yards in the second half, which is amazing performance by Boise State. And I say a ton of rushing yards. Most of that was the quarterback run game. Boise State did well against the running back run game, but I believe in the first half, I didn't write down the exact stat here. I just wrote down how many yards they allowed in the second half, but I think they finished the game like 105 rushing yards. So just do that deduction there. So 90. I'm going to have to do public math, all right. 96 rushing yards in the first half there, right? Yeah. Yeah, 96 rushing yards in the first half allowed, and only 9 yards rushing yards allowed in the second half there, I believe is what that number was. So Boise State, anyhow, the main point here is a just complete turnaround on defense in the second half. But in between all that, even when they were giving up all those yards in the first half, Boise State had an amazing, one of the most incredible bend but don't break performances I've ever seen. First half, totally dominated between the 20s. Could not stop the ball. Could not stop McBride. Could not stop Centillo. Could not stop Centillo in the run game especially. Could not stop the passing game to McBride between the 20s. But Boise State stood strong when it mattered most. The D-line especially stood up firm at the goal line. Boise State had 3 goal line stands in the first half and 1 in the second half. Colorado State actually scored 5 times in this one, but 4 of them were field goals. So 4 out of 4 on field goals, but only 1 touchdown in this game. And that's the difference. Boise State ends up winning by 9 points versus having a game here where Colorado State goes out and scores 5 times, puts up 35 points, and ends up winning the game by a touchdown. But instead, because Boise State forced all these field goals, they get to win the game by 9 points. An amazing stand here. Yeah, they couldn't stop Centillo and McBride, especially early in this one. First 2 drives, the 2 of them, Centillo's legs, so Centillo's rushing yards plus McBride's receiving yards accounted for 79 out of the 136 offensive yards in the first 2 drives. So touchdown and a field goal there in the first 2 drives for Colorado State. But Boise State really hunkered down there starting about the 4th or 3rd drive, about the 3rd drive there for Boise State. They forced a 3-and-out. They forced 2 punts there in back-to-back drives. They did allow a field goal there late in the second half, but they really keyed in on stopping McBride, pretty much took him completely out of the game there in the second half, and basically completely stopped the quarterback run game for the most part there in the second half. So Boise State, pretty much, like I said, only 9 yards rushing overall in the second half, completely took away the quarterback rushing game in the second half there. And what was great, though, overall, is Boise State held this Colorado State running game to almost nothing. 43 yards rushing by the running backs for the entire game. That is it. 43 yards rushing for the entire game. So the legs of Centillo and the receiving ability of McBride accounted for over 44% of the offense for the entire game. 168 out of 381 yards there for the offense overall. But Boise State completely stopped the run game, which this is huge for a Boise State team that has not been good against the run game this season, has shown a little bit of improvement here, but of course allowed a ton of yards against Air Force, which is what's going to happen in the run game against an option team like Air Force, but showed to hold a team here to under 50 yards rushing. Boise State hasn't done that this season, and they did it for the running backs, and they did that today. It was an amazing performance by Boise State, putting a complete stop to the run game here in this key, crucial matchup against Colorado State. Boise State still technically is in the running for a Mountain West Championship game, but if they lost this game to Colorado State, they would have been completely out of it. No chance. Now, if Air Force drops a game, so if Air Force loses, I'm going to do another video about it where I look at it all and see where it is. But I think we're sitting right now is if Air Force loses another game and Utah State loses 2 games, I think is how it works. I think if Air Force loses another game and Utah State drops 2 games, then Boise State's in. I'm going to do another video where I talk about Boise State's chance at the Mountain West Championship game. The main point here is Boise State's sitting just 3rd out of the race for the Mountain West Championship game, and there is a very, very, very good possibility that they could get to that Mountain West Championship game despite what's happened. So I think it's 1 loss by Utah State and 1 more loss by Air Force, is how it's supposed to work here. Air Force got to lose 1 more time, Utah State's got to lose, I think, 1 more time, and then Boise State would be in to the Mountain West Championship game. So that's all that needs to happen. So 1 more loss, I think, by both those teams, and again, I'll double check that when I do my video. But the main point here is Boise State, when it mattered most, came up big. Their defense, They stopped him a bunch, but 16 points in the first half is still 16 points. They only allowed 3 points in the second half and only 94 total overall yards. This has been an amazing defense at making adjustments in the second half. Incredible props, defensive coordinator here for Boise State. And I think that also goes to Andy Avalos and his being a former defensive coordinator himself, the vision that he is infusing into. I would imagine that he is highly involved in this Boise State defense. When you have a head coach that's got an offensive background, they're always involved in the the offensive side of things, usually calling some or most of the play calls themselves. So I'd imagine a defensive coach of Andy Avalos' caliber would be heavily involved in the defense, which is what I said Boise State needed. That's the bit that Boise State has really dropped off the board the last 5 years or so, has been the defensive side, and that's the bit that needs emphasis. And this has been this has not been a great defense overall, but it has been a great second half defense that has made amazing adjustments throughout the season. So A overall for this defense. Jones almost had a pick there. I have that written down, so I just wanted to mention it at the end. Dropped a would-be touchdown, but he had a great game overall. Some great tackles for loss. And Banya, love this kid. Plays with so much energy. Got a sack right there. Second or third last play of the game for Boise State. So 4 goal line stands. Some great individual performances. Jones, Banya, Tubner. Oh, I might be mispronouncing that name. Either, you know who I'm talking about. He had some amazing plays. Was really stopping twice. He was able to get Centillo to the ground and on what would have been big plays. And was able to stop the running back, I believe, one time as well. So he stopped the breakout at the goal line. The Colorado State running back was trying to make a breakout play to the right side there, and he got him by the legs and brought him down. If he'd broken that tackle, it would have been at least a first down, if not more. Forced a punt out of that. Great return by Shakir. Ended up being a touchdown for Boise State, and a big part of that was because of Tubner's performance in the game and specifically in that play. So Boise State disciplined play in the second half. Disciplined play within the goal line, gave too many yards, but they've been a great bend but don't break team for the most part this season on defense. We saw more of that tonight. Absolutely deserve the A because they are a huge part. Like I said, when you force a team to go for field goals 4 times inside of the red zone, you're going to deserve an A. You're going to impact a game, and you're probably going to win that game, and that's what we saw today. All right, special teams, A- for the special teams performance overall. Some really bad moments here, but also some game-changing moments, and they impacted the game and were a big part of the reason that Boise State won it, so they deserve at least an A ranking here. We'll talk about the bad here, we'll end on the good. So first off, Velasquez, a little bit of an off night for him. He's been great this season. Not his career, he has not been. He has struggled to be consistent, has always had just an amazing leg, but has struggled to use that leg consistently. And we saw a little bit of that kind of former Velasquez tonight. His first 2 punts were shanks, 35 and 37 yards. His next 2 punts were both over 50. One for 53 that ended up at the 22, and one for 54 that rolled down at the 2. Was an amazing punt. And then he had a 34-yard punt. So, great performance standards between 2 pretty bad performances overall. Ended up, because of those great punts, actually ended up averaging 42 yards per punt, which is pretty good, or it's okay. So he, obviously didn't end up costing the game. Boise State's defense was able to really make up for some of those bad punts, especially late. And of course, he had those amazing punts middle of the game, and that one punt that rolled up at the 2 was a big part of the reason Boise State ended up scoring afterwards, because it's forced Colorado State to punt from their end zone. Got a great punt return, ended up scoring on that drive. So, he's part of the reason Boise State won the game, and he luckily wasn't part of the reason Boise State lost this game. Was a great job by Velasquez to kind of find that redemption, even if he wasn't consistent throughout the game here overall. Also, one last minor bad point, Shakir almost dropped a punt return. Didn't, bobbled it. But obviously, I'd like to see a little bit of the kind of 2-step that Avery Williams would do. Avery Williams, if he didn't feel like he'd caught the ball as he wanted to, he'd do a little bit of a dance there in the backfield to really get his mind right. Shakir had a lot on his mind today because he was handling the ball pretty much every single play. But we'd like to see that a little bit out of that kind of mental discipline that made Avery Williams the best returner Boise State has ever had, in my opinion. I'd like to see a little bit out of that out of Shakir. But let's talk about what made Shakir added to Shakir's amazing performance today. A 30-yard punt return. I would like to see Boise State go for the block, but they didn't. They went for more of a return mode. Actually ended the Colorado State kicker punted so far, it was like a 60-plus yard punt. He out-punted his coverage, and Shakir ended up getting it all the way back in Colorado State 40, returning it to about like the 44 or something like that on an amazing punt return where he started all the way on the left side of the field, reversed all the way to the right side, and made a beeline up the right side of the field to get Boise State to the 44, and that, of course, ended in a touchdown for Boise State. So a big part of the reason that Boise State won this game was the performance of Velasquez in the middle punting game there and the return game for Shakir. But I'm not done yet, because Boise State also forced a fumble on kick return, which they didn't end up recovering, but it's important to note that Boise State's been so good at forcing fumbles this year, so another forced fumble on their record. But most importantly here, like I mentioned earlier, Riley Smith blocking the punt. That was huge for Boise State to be able to take the momentum late in this game that they had already established to pretty much take away any chance of Colorado State being able to come and win this game. Colorado State, of course, when they came and played Boise State last season, Boise State blocked, I think it was two punts and a kick. It was like 3 or 4 blocks. I'd have to get the stats exactly for that one. But it was a block fest. Avery Williams all over the field, of course, in that one. And we saw a little bit of that tonight with Riley Smith straight up the middle, right past the men, going and blocking a punt in this one. So a little bit of, since it is Halloween, a little bit of haunting of Colorado State's past. It was great to see that blocked punt from Riley Smith. Plays with so much energy. One of my favorite players on this Boise State team. So B+ offense, A defense, and A- special teams. We'll wrap it up here real quick. Look at my 3 keys of the game. We already talked a little bit about this, so we won't take too long on these. First, take it out of the referee's hands. Boise State's going to get an A on this because there was a really bad call in this game. Boise State, Hank Bachmeier, it was a pretty impressive play, actually, taking a hit on the double clutch. So if he just thrown it right away, he wouldn't have taken the hit and he'd gotten the ball off. But he double clutched it, takes a hit, gets the ball off anyway to Octavius Evans, who catches the ball. Boise State runs right up to the line and gets the ball off. Well, halfway through the play, so Bachmeier's already released the pass for a touchdown to Riley Smith. So halfway through the play, a whistle blows. Riley Smith catches it, runs into the end zone, and the referees call the play back, called the play dead, even though they blew the whistle halfway through the play, and said that a replay had been initiated from upstairs. Except that Boise State got the ball off before the whistle was blown, before they called for the replay. So it's null and void. Too bad. You should have been faster. That's the point of running hurry up, is to not allow the referee to get a chance to call their whistle. Boise State executed perfectly on that play. The referees just said, whatever, we don't care, and called the play dead. That is completely illegal. You cannot do that. If the play is already started, even if you blow the whistle, it should have been a touchdown, because you cannot call a play dead that has already started because you want to do a replay. Again, Boise State has been plagued all season by atrocious refereeing. Now, Boise State didn't complete that pass on the review. It showed that Evans dropped the ball. A little bit of a questionable call just from the angle. It could have gone either way. They did end up overturning the play. So I think it probably was incomplete, but it was close. So if he had caught that, it would have taken, if it was a clear catch, if Bachmeier had got it off in the first throw, there wouldn't have even been an opportunity for replay, and then that Riley Smith touchdown would have counted. But regardless of the fact that he didn't make the catch, Boise State got the ball off before the whistle was blown, so there should not have been a replay. But Boise State, this could have been the third game this year that Boise State would have lost, primarily because of the referees, but they didn't. Because Boise State got 2 scores because of focused, clear catches, concentrated playing throughout the rest, disciplined playing throughout the rest of the game, not giving the referees any opportunities to screw Boise State like they have all season, played diligently and played aggressively so that the referees couldn't come and take Boise State's win away from them. Boise State won by enough points 9-point spread here by 2 possessions, won by enough that this terrible call, which should still be reviewed. Mountain West, they've got to do something about this. Your referees are absolutely garbage this season. They're not the greatest referees in the league anyway, and they are the definite worst. So Boise State, the Mountain West might play at the peak of competition, but the referees are down in the valleys. They're not even in the valleys. They're in the mines underground, taking a couple of beers in a cave or something like that, because they're not out on the field reffing. The Mountain West referees are some of the worst referees in the country, and the Mountain West needs to be issuing statements about these referees' performances and reviewing their referees, which they're clearly not. So, yes, the referees were terrible in this one, heavily biased against Boise State. But Boise State took it out of the referee's hands, won this game despite them. A performance for Boise State, being able to get this win despite the referees and being able to play a game that didn't. And yeah, Boise State has lost 2 games because of referees, but as has been pointed out repeatedly on the page, Boise State shouldn't be in a position that they are determined on a referee call to win a game. And that's absolutely right. Boise State should be winning these games by 2, 3, 4 possessions, so that it doesn't matter that a bad referee call is made, and that's what we saw tonight. Second here, make Shakir the focal point. A++. Absolutely awesome job by Boise State. We've already talked about it. If you have a player take a third of your offensive yards, you're making him a focal point. Boise State, they had Shakir line up as a straight-up running back. I'm not calling a sweep. I'm not calling wildcat. I mean, they had him line up behind the Halani or behind the fullback as a running back 3 times. They were trying to get the ball in Shakir's hands as often as they could, using him on the sweeps, using him on the deep ball, using him on the screen plays. He was all over the field. In fact, at one time, one of the announcers was wondering if he'd gotten hurt, if he was injured, because he was kind of running slow. He didn't have an explosive step, and the other announcer correctly pointed out that he was just gassed because he'd been basically on every single play. And that's what Boise State, honestly, that's what they need to do. He's the best player on their team. The second half was great for Boise State. They were able to spread the ball around, and they had success in the second half being able to spread the ball around to a variety of different players. But if your number one player isn't heavily involved in the game, you're probably not winning that game. I'm not saying that Khalil Shakir should be taking a third of the offensive yards every single game. That's not going to be a pattern for success for Boise State moving forward in the future. But he definitely needs to be taking more than 4 or 5 catches every game like he has in the past few games. So the fact that he was so heavily involved, the fact that Boise State found a way to get their best player the ball is a great sign that they are being intentional. It was almost, I'm sure they don't. I'm not taking credit for this, but it was almost like they'd watched my preview video because of how, my second key here was make Shakir the focal point, and they did that to a T. So I'm sure that, the coaches are seeing the same things that I'm seeing and more, so that's why they were able to diagnose that Shakir needed to be more involved. So that's why that happened. But it was freaky going, my gosh, it's like they're following my key perfectly. That's why it's A++, because Shakir was amazingly involved in this game, exactly how Boise State needs to run it, getting him the ball as much as they can throughout the rest of the season here. All right, so find a role for Jack Sears was my final key. I'm giving them a D and not an F because so he came in after a Bachmeier hit. That was a forced play. He had to come in for that. But they did seem to be trying to find a role for him. It was a weird series late in the game there in the fourth quarter. Sears came in for 2 plays to replace Bachmeier. He handed the ball off one, and then he did a quarterback draw straight at the middle, neither for very many yards. And then Bachmeier came back into the game. So it seemed like they were trying something, like they were testing something with Shakir out there. They weren't intending for him to come and finish off the drive. So it was kind of weird. That's why it's a D and not an F. It should probably be an F because they didn't use him intentionally throughout the game. Bachmeier ended up actually playing well enough, even in the red zone, that they didn't need to use Shakir and his running ability. But I still think there is a role for Shakir. Sorry, I keep saying Shakir. For Sears, there is still a role for Sears in this offense that he can bring in his running ability, use him in a Montel Cozart type of way. Not as much as Boise State used Montel Cozart. That really threw off Brett Rippon's rhythm. I'm not saying use him that much, but have a role for him. Have some packages that you run throughout the game. Keep him involved in this offense. Keep him involved in this program, because we don't want to lose Sears. He's an amazing backup for Boise State. He could be a starter for Boise State. He's that good. Absolutely on the same, I believe, on this about the same level. I mean, these two quarterbacks bring different levels of play. I'm happy that Bachmeier is the starter for Boise State, but other than that, they're pretty much even, just coming from different styles. You know, Bachmeier more of kind of your wild card quarterback, where Sears is a little bit more of a pro style. So two great quarterbacks. They need to find a role for Sears. I think that he can see a role on short yardage plays, RPO style, and definitely down in the red zone, where his accuracy throwing the ball and his legs come in big. Boise State definitely, I didn't really write that thinking that Boise State would run this key. I didn't really write this key because I thought Boise State was going to use it or need to use it in this game. I kind of wrote it for the season overall, because Boise State really going for the rest of the year needs to find a way to use Sears in their offensive packages. So next game, Boise State is going to have Skinner back. He was taken out for a targeting play, and that's something I didn't mention in my defensive review. Sorry, I missed going over that. Skinner taken out for another targeting call. I believe that's his third of the season. I was going to look it up before the video, but I forgot. He's had more than 3 called on him for sure, but I think he's only been taken out for 3. Luckily, it was in the first half, so he's going to be back for the second half. It's going to be huge for Boise State. Big matchup next week. But that is something that the defensive players, they love the energy, love the aggression, love the fire that Skinner and all the rest of the players of Boise State are playing with. But it's something I noticed throughout the game that wasn't just Skinner. The Boise State players as a whole are tending to duck their heads when they tackle. Boise State was probably lucky they didn't get another 2, because after Skinner got called out, I was looking for it. They probably were lucky they didn't get another 2 targeting calls called on them, at least 1 against Jones, and I thought I saw 1 against Wimpy. So Boise State lucky that they didn't end up getting more, and that's really something that it doesn't look like they're being intentional about, keeping their heads up, crossing the face, crossing the body, getting that head in the chest, not getting the head in the chest area, but crossing the face mask and getting some good tackling style versus just trying to obliterate somebody. Because as we saw against Air Force, just slamming someone doesn't always work, especially when you have a running back completely blanked on the Air Force running back's name. I think his name is Robinson, right? Roberts. So especially when you have running back Roberts' capabilities, where he's able to bounce off. He was absolutely slammed last week. Actually got targeting called on that play. Not last week, but 2 weeks ago. Got targeting called on that play, but he was able to spin off it because there was no arms involved. There was no wrap up involved on the tackle. It was just a straight up slam. He spun off it and kept going. So Boise State players love the aggression. But I think that's part of a young coaching staff adapting this team, is that they're not teaching necessarily the fundamentals, the level that needs to be taught. And that's something that definitely needs to be improved so Boise State doesn't end up losing their key players. Luckily, didn't end up hurting Boise State in this one. Hasn't hurt Boise State as much, the loss of Skinner, even though he's the main tackle. He's the number 1 tackler on this team. The defense really runs through him. When he's been taken out, the rest of the defense has managed, for the most part, to step up. We saw that in this game. But there's going to come some opponents here that might not be the case, and Boise State definitely needs to have their number 1 defender on the field the whole game, and learning how to keep his head up is going to be a big part of that. So thank you for watching this video. Awesome job for Boise State. Just love to see Boise State win over Colorado State. So it's one consistency for the Bronco fans' life right now, because neither them nor UNLV have been able to beat Boise State. So 4-4, big game next week. I'm looking forward to doing the preview video for it. If you're not already a member of Bronco Nation, make sure on Facebook, make sure you go and become a member of Bronco Nation. Over 9,000 members now. And if you haven't already, please make sure you like and subscribe. Thank you for watching this video. And as always, go Big Blue!